Insights into Entertainment, a podcast series taking a deeper look into entertainment and media. Our husband and wife team of pop culture fanatics are exploring all things from music and movies to television and fandom. We'll look at the interesting and obscure entertainment news of the week. We'll talk about theme park and pop culture news. We'll give you the latest and greatest on pop culture conventions. We'll give you a deep dive into Disney, Star Wars, and much more. Check out our video episodes at youtube.com/insightsintothings. Our audio episodes at podcast.insightsintoentertainment.com, or check us out on the web at insightsintothings.com. Insightful podcasts by informative hosts. Insights into Things, a podcast network. Welcome to Insights into Tomorrow, where we take a deeper look into how the issues of today will impact the world of tomorrow. From politics and world news to media and technology, we discuss how today's headlines are becoming tomorrow's reality.
Welcome to Insights into Tomorrow. This is episode 11, The Trump Legacy. I'm your host, Joseph Whalen, and my co-host, Sam Whalen. How you doing today, Sam?
Doing good. It's been a little bit of a while since we've done a podcast, but looking forward to another great show.
Yeah, we took a little time off over the holidays to redo the studio and so forth. In the process, we have a new president. So I thought it would be interesting. We had originally discussed doing a podcast on the insurrection on January 6th. And I thought that was probably, while it was a worthwhile topic, it might be a little too focused. I think it would be probably more interesting and more helpful to look at the Trump legacy in a more general sense. I don't want to, I'm trying to be as fair and impartial as possible. I don't want to just look at the negative stuff from Trump. And I think the insurrection reflects very poorly on him. So today we're going to look at what some of his notable accomplishments were over the last 4 years. We'll look at some of his failures. And then we'll have kind of an open discussion about what the lasting effects of Donald Trump on the U.S., the world, the presidency, and so forth are. And then just a candid talk about where we think the future is under Joe Biden for the next 4 years. So, ready to get into it? All right. So, I wasn't even going to do the plugs because I think this is going to be a long podcast. We'll do the plugs at the end of the show. Notable accomplishments. I kind of broke these down into a couple of key ones that came out of the whitehouse.gov website prior to the changeover. And the first one, and one that I think really is probably the biggest, is the reshaping of the federal judiciary. So everyone knows that Trump appointed 3 Supreme Court justices that are life terms, but he also appointed 220 judges to lower courts, which are all lifetime appointments as well. 25% of U.S. Circuit Court judges were Trump that are in place today were Trump nominees. And Trump's influence as a result of that will live on through the judiciary for the foreseeable future. Do you think that is a good thing, a bad thing, indifferent thing? What are your thoughts?
I think it depends on what these judges are going to be ruling on in the coming years. And especially since it's impressive as a president to be able to do that in only 4 years to appoint that many judges and 3 Supreme Court justices as well. So whether or not they're going to, the judges will, rule on certain things in the coming years, it's still, it's something that'll be in a history book looking back at the presidency of one of his accomplishments.
Absolutely. And I think the one thing that we've seen so far is the 3 Supreme Court justices did not tip the balance of power in the Supreme Court at this point in time, given the number of cases that Trump brought to the Supreme Court during the election phase that did not go in his favor. So I think, if nothing else, the impartiality of the Supreme Court seems to still be intact, which is a good thing. The next thing that we look at is Space Force. Space Force is the first new branch of the U.S. military since the U.S. Air Force was created from the Army Air Corps after World War II. It's supposed to be a more centralized version of the military missions in space. Now, that's not fighting aliens or anything like that. What they do is they handle satellite surveillance. They handle all the military satellites. They're responsible for the GPS system that's both civilian and military use. They're monitoring the various debris that's in space to make sure that it's not dangerous to future missions. What do you think? Do you think, I'll be honest with you. When I heard that we were creating Space Force, I couldn't help but chuckle. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't the only one, because it spawned a Steve Carell comedy series, that came out of this. What are your thoughts on Space Force?
Well, I think space exploration is important. And I know over the years, the public has sort of waned away from that, and there's not as much interest as there was like in the 80s and 90s and stuff. I do think if Space Force is going to actually do something, and it's not just a dumping ground for money like a lot of other of these types of programs, they spend a lot of money, especially when it comes to the military. There's a lot of money put into that. But I think if they do monitor things like the debris around the Earth, which is getting really, it's becoming a real problem, and satellites and things like that, I think that's a good start. And maybe they'll segue into actual exploration missions in the future, hopefully.
Yeah, we don't really know what direction they're going in right now. They really inherited a lot of things that the Air Force had already been doing. They're not doing exploration at this point. Yeah. That is still the domain of NASA. But, we have missions up there. You have an International Space Station up there that occasionally needs to be moved so it doesn't get hit by a refrigerator-sized piece of debris that brings it down. So that's really what they're working towards.
And you also have private companies like SpaceX that are going a lot more in, they have a little bit more of a budget than NASA does for the funding. So they're able to do a lot more missions into space.
Sure. Yeah. In fact, speaking of space junk, one of the things that's really starting to crowd the low Earth orbit are these new internet-enabled satellites. SpaceX, Elon Musk is putting a huge constellation of satellites, some 400 or 500 satellites up there, all of which are moving obstacles that are flying at 17,500 miles an hour. So it's not a small job monitoring that stuff for safety. What's the next thing that we have?
So next up, we have the tax reform. It was the biggest overhaul of the nation's tax code in 3 decades. It slashed corporate tax rates from 35% to 21%. Some critics argue it was a windfall for massive corporations at the expense of the middle class. Administration officials predicted GDP boost by 3 to 6%.
Now, we haven't seen the GDP boost that they expected so far. However, I can say, at least in my experience, that slashing of the corporate tax was enough of an incentive for my company to give more back to its employees. I think my company is an exception to that rule. I think a lot of companies take that as a windfall and they absorb the profit themselves. Right. This kind of goes back to the early 80s with Reagan economics of trickle-down economics, where, give the rich people more money and then it'll trickle down to other people.
Which I don't think that worked then, did it?
That has never worked in the history of mankind,
Yeah.
actually.
Turns out the rich just get richer.
You don't get rich by spending it,
Yeah.
that's for sure. So the tax reforms definitely are there. A lot of those went in place before the COVID pandemic happened. And I think a lot of the benefits that happened from that tax reform are largely wiped out because of the debt the country has incurred as a result of a lot of these COVID relief packages.
Yeah, but that tax plan, that corporate tax rate is going to stay in place until the new administration could put something together to overturn it. So it's something to think about.
That's correct. Yeah. So the benefits will still be there for a lot of that. Let's talk about the reform of the justice system a little bit. So one of the things that Trump tried to do was address the mass incarceration in the federal prisons. For several decades, they've been severely overpopulated. A lot of it had to do with lower level drug arrests for minor infractions. But he also overhauled the federal sentencing to reduce the minimum mandatory sentences. And that's kind of a concept that a lot of people aren't familiar with, is that the federal guidelines for sentencing for just about every crime out there, there's a minimum amount of time that you can sentence someone. And even if it's an insignificant issue, but you have to sentence someone, they have to get that minimum amount of time. And that was largely done to try to preserve fairness in the penal system itself so that you couldn't have people buying judges off and stuff like that. So one of the things that Trump did do was he reduced those minimum sentences so that even though you may be going into jail for these offenses, you're getting out sooner. He also tried to shift focus from punishment to rehabilitation and more job training opportunities. One of the problems that convicted felons have when they get out of prison is they lack the skills to get jobs and employment. As a result, they become a burden on society. So the focus kind of shifted to try to prepare these individuals to get back into the workforce and become producing members of society again. And what's the last thing that we have to talk about for his accomplishments?
Defeating the ISIS caliphate. Trump has falsely claimed ISIS is totally defeated. Though territory has been lost, there are still an estimated 18,000 fighters between Iraq and Syria. The U.S. was successful in killing ISIS leader, probably going to pronounce his name wrong, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. I apologize if
That's
I
actually
didn't say
pretty
that wrong.
good.
Close.
We'll go with that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's no different than when George Bush landed on the aircraft carrier with the big giant banner and said mission accomplished.
Right.
Progress has been made. More progress has been claimed than has been made, I think. At this point in time, ISIS is lacking territory, but they're not lacking support. They're getting support through other countries like Syria and Iraq and Iran. So they're being funded by these countries, but they might not have the territory that they once had.
Yeah, I think conflicts like this in this area of the world are always going to be this messy, and they have been since the U.S. began to get involved way back in the 70s and 80s. It's always been a difficult, not war, but difficult conflict to manage, whether through proxy or through direct involvement from the U.S. And I think that this is no different. I think, and it's going to continue to be this way because it's too difficult of something for us to manage and certainly not fix.
Sure. Yeah, no, I agree 100%. One of the things that I didn't put in here that was related to this was the drawdown on troops in Iraq and Afghanistan, which Donald Trump has made significant progress there. He had wanted to get us out of that area completely, but because of the sensitive nature of that territory, we couldn't pull out entirely.
Yeah.
But the number of troops that are in that area have been reduced, ironically enough, to the point that we had more people in Washington, more soldiers in Washington for the inauguration than we had in Afghanistan and Iraq.
Wow. Yeah, it's difficult because I'm obviously not like a general or anything, but it seems like we make the progress with the troops, and then the second the troops are gone, all that progress is lost, sometimes overnight. So it's a difficult call. It's easy to say we're going to get everybody out of here, but it's a sticky situation. It's not that easy.
Yeah, and when you think about it, you figure this is the longest war the United States has ever been involved in. You know, the closest one to this was Vietnam, which was roughly 10, 12 years. But figure we've been fighting this war in that territory, this war on terror, since September 11th attacks.
Yeah, and we could probably do a whole show comparing that to Vietnam. I mean, they're somewhat similar in terms of a difficult terrain, the language barriers, things like that, guerrilla tactics, and all that. It is just a mess.
Absolutely. So that's some of the notable accomplishments that Trump had in office. Let's take a break. We'll come back and we'll talk about some of the failures that I think a lot of people have focused on.
Insights into Teens, a podcast series exploring the issues and challenges of today's youth. Talking to real teens about real teen problems. Explore issues from braces to puberty, social anxiety to financial responsibility. Each week, we talk about the topics concerning today's youth. We look at how the issues affect teens, how to cope with these issues, and how parents, friends, and loved ones can help teens handle these challenges. Check out our video episodes on youtube.com/insightsintothings. Catch our audio versions on podcast.insightsintoteens.com or on the web at insightsintothings.com.
Welcome back to Insights into Tomorrow. Today, we are talking about the legacy of Donald Trump. We just went over some of his notable accomplishments. I think it's prudent for us to talk about some of his failures at this point in time. So the first one that I have here is the incident in Charlottesville related to George Floyd. So during this entire process, Trump really blamed, quote, many sides for the violence at the rally for George Floyd. And at the time, he claimed that there were, quote, very fine people on both sides. One side being the Black Lives Matter group who were protesting the death of George Floyd. The other side being made up largely of white supremacists and the KKK. This statement itself really stirred up a bit of a hornet's nest here when he was describing these white supremacists as very fine people. And he took criticism from both Democrats and Republicans, including traditionally staunch supporters like Lindsey Graham. What are your thoughts on this particular failure of Trump's?
I think it seems like such a simple thing, right? You see white supremacists and KKK leaders on one side. You just have to condemn them. And he couldn't do it. And he was directly asked, I remember multiple times by reporters, to just condemn them. And he wouldn't do it. And it makes you wonder why that is, and what is going through his mind and his administration's mind, why he simply would not come out and condemn them. And you saw that again recently with the insurrection at the Capitol, where he said, "Go home, we love you." Very kind words to people that were attempting to storm and succeeded in storming the Capitol building. And it just makes you wonder.
Yeah, well, and the thing is that when this happened, there was a lot of research that came out about Trump's history and the Trump family history, and information came out at this time that his father was a member of the KKK. He was arrested in the early part of the 20th century at a KKK rally for crimes that were committed at the time. So it was very disturbing to see this side of a president come out where he was openly endorsing white supremacists. And that was a pattern of repeated alarmist type behavior that we saw the last at least 2 years of his presidency where we've had these issues. What was the next thing that we're pointing out here?
So we're taking a look at America's global image under the Trump presidency. America's global image has declined significantly under Trump. I think that anybody that reviews the last 4 years can probably put that together. Trump repeatedly insulted key U.S. allies while cozying up to dictators. Trump pulled the U.S. out of key international agreements, like the Paris Climate Accords. Surveys show the majority of citizens from 32 different countries have an overall lack of confidence in Trump to do the right thing on world affairs. And finally, Trump's handling of the coronavirus pandemic has left the U.S. embarrassed on the world stage and created a void in global leadership that China is rushing to fill in currently.
Yeah, I mean, he left us really in a bit of a predicament.
Yeah.
So much so that immediately after the election, before the results were certified, you had allied nations that were reaching out to Joe Biden to congratulate him on the win before it was even official.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what the long-term implications of that are, because I think a lot of the damage that he did, at least as far as our allies go, are things that can be built back fairly quickly with him out of office.
Mm-hmm.
My concerns center around more the relationships that he had with the adversaries of the United States, like the Putins and North Korea and so forth. You know, I mean, he really took the country in a direction that it never went in the past. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple instances of him talking about how he admires Vladimir Putin and things like that. And it's not a great look, right? I mean, on paper, Americans supposed to be like this bastion of freedom, which obviously in practice is not necessarily the case. But when you're on the world stage cozying up with known dictators, borderline admitted dictators who have, of course, never been proven, but have, eliminated political rivals through, various means or subjugating their own people. When you see the leader of the free world being friendly with them, it sends a disturbing message to other countries, not to mention the people of America as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of scary when we get to that point. So the next thing we talk about is immigration, which was one of the things that Donald Trump had campaigned on. His promise to build the wall, to stop illegal immigration coming in, to deport the people that were in the country already that shouldn't have been here, in his opinion. Trump has been accused of human rights abuses and violating international law by the UN for his treatment of undocumented immigrants. I couldn't tell you the last time an American president was accused of human rights violations. Trump policies had led to the separation of at least 5,500 families and saw children placed in cages for the world to see, which was another embarrassing moment that the press really hammered him on. 445 of those children still are left separated from their parents. So it's a continuing problem where they can't find these parents for the children. The president of the American Academy for Pediatrics labeled Trump's policies nothing less than government-sanctioned child abuse.
Yikes.
What are your thoughts on his immigration policy? I mean, we've got a lot of the wall done, right? So is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I don't think the wall was a great idea. I mean, it for people that think that we should take a strong stance on immigration, I think it's a very good physical thing to see. But I think in practice, I don't know that the wall really works. And not to mention, speaking back to the ICE situation, we actually talked about doing a whole episode on ICE. But doing the research, we found it would be better to just lump it in with this. But the fact that 545 children don't have their parents or any real person to take care of them still, and for this long is horrifying. And the fact that it's still happening.
Yeah. Yeah. And Trump tried to defend his actions by claiming that a lot of these children were not brought over by their parents. They were being brought over by criminals and mules and, people that were trying to get into the country illegally and using the children as a means to get into the country. And there just wasn't any facts to back that claim up. As with a lot of the things that we deal with Trump, there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of what the Trump administration has labeled alternative facts. And I think you have a difficulty in sifting through. There's so much misinformation thrown out about these things that it takes an effort to sift through that you shouldn't have to make such an effort to do.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, we'll probably touch on it more later in our concluding thoughts, but I think that's part of the plan, is to put as much false things out there that you question what is real and what is true. And then from there, you can make your reality whatever you want.
Right. So what was the next thing that we're going to ding him on here?
So the handling of Iran, Syria, and Afghanistan, we touched a little bit on this with the troop withdrawals. Trump's decision to withdraw from the U.S. from the 2015 Iran nuclear deal induced chaos throughout the Middle East. It remains one of Trump's most unpopular decisions in the global arena. Trump has failed to thwart Iran's aggressive behavior through his maximum pressure campaign. He exacerbated the situation by ordering the killing of Iran's top general, another name I'm going to probably mispronounce, Qasem Soleimani, which was huge when it happened. I remember we talked about it on one of the previous shows, about how insane that was. And it's almost like we forgot it happened, but here it is again, looking back at everything. Iran has since abandoned the nuclear deal and is actively working towards nuclear weapons. Again, Trump pulled U.S. troops out of Syria, abandoning U.S. allied Kurdish forces. I remember that was extremely controversial too, especially with, I saw a lot of veterans on Twitter like talking about that when that happened, about how that was wrong to do because you left these people hanging to dry. The withdrawal induced a humanitarian crisis in the region and the security vacuum that Russia, Iran, and accused war criminal Syrian President Bashar al-Assad benefited from. Trump started a massive pullout of U.S. troops from Afghanistan, essentially surrendering the country once again to the Taliban. And finally, Trump dismissed published reports that Russia paid bounties to Taliban-like militants to kill U.S. troops. So we're getting a little bit of the cozying up with dictators again in this section as well. And overall, it's not a great look.
Yeah, no. And if you look, at the big picture of weakening our position in the Middle East by all these troop pullouts, by pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal, which is just going to incite additional chaos. It's going to rile the Israelis who won't stand for Iraq having nuclear weapons. So they're going to act unilaterally on their own if we do not maintain a coalition in the area. You're basically lighting the fuse on a powder keg. And I look at what he did and I can't fathom why you would have done that. He claims that he doesn't want America tied up in these long-term wars, but we're almost like the control rod in the nuclear reactor there. And if you pull that control rod out, the nuclear reactor is going to melt down. Yeah,
it's kind of like what we talked about before. Like it's easy to say, I don't want America involved in these situations. But when you've got nuclear deals signed with these countries, that's more than just a war. There's larger implications there on both the world stage and for that local area. And it's like you said, it's lighting a fuse that I guess the new administration is going to have to deal with.
Yeah, and it's a headache. I mean, not only is it weakening the U.S. position and our allies' position in the region, you're directly strengthening our adversary's position at the same time, which makes you wonder what team Trump was really playing for at the time. So the next big one that Trump has been trying to take care of since day one was the repeal and the replacement of Obamacare. Trump lost the vote for a full congressional appeal, thanks to, at the time,
Ruth Bader Ginsburg?
No, Senator McCain.
Oh.
That was like one of the great acts of defiance that Senator McCain had against Donald Trump was to turn that vote down. He's managed to dismantle parts of it, including the rollbacks on tax penalties for those that are not enrolled in health care. But in the meantime, he's failed to offer anything close to a replacement. He's been questioned several times on this, and his statement has been, it's ready. We're going to roll it out in a couple of weeks. A couple of weeks never got here. He never rolled out a replacement for it. The Supreme Court, as a result of that, did not allow it to be repealed because there wasn't a replacement for it. But he's weakened it significantly. And this is another problem that he's generated that the current administration, the new administration, is going to have to deal with.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the Biden team has said what their plans are to deal with this, but you'd imagine they're probably just going to reinforce it and kind of build back up where it was.
You have to. You have to at least put in the stuff that was pulled out at this point, because it's kind of silly to not have these in.
And it's unfortunate for people because this was one of his big things when he was running for president, was that he was going to get rid of Obamacare and put something new into place. It's unfortunate that all these people that voted for him are promised that, and unfortunately simply never got it.
Well, and the ultimate irony is that he didn't want to get rid of Obamacare. He wanted to get rid of Obama's legacy. And Obamacare, being a large part of that legacy, was one of the things that he targeted.
Right.
What's the next thing we have?
So we have the twice impeachment. This has been obviously in the news recently. Trump is the first U.S. president to be impeached twice while in office. Trump's first impeachment was for abuse of power when he attempted to solicit outside foreign interference in a U.S. election. I believe that was Ukraine, correct?
Correct.
Trump withheld $400 million in congressionally approved military aid from the Ukraine to pressure them into investigating Joe Biden's son for corruption. His second impeachment revolved around his attempt to incite an insurrection of his supporters when they stormed and breached the U.S. Capitol in an attempt to stop the certification of the 2020 election.
Yeah, we're not talking about flimsy things here.
No.
We're literally talking about two treasonous acts that the President of the United States, who's sworn to uphold the Constitution, has been accused of. Now, the first impeachment that we had, he was not found guilty. He was not convicted of the impeachment. But that was largely because the Senate was controlled, majority of the Senate was controlled by the Republicans at the time, who, for whatever reason, whether it was fear of repercussions or what, would not go against Donald Trump despite the overwhelming evidence. You know, the large accusation in that first impeachment was that he solicited outside interference in American elections. If that wasn't enough, based on this phone call that came out, during the whole process of this, when it came out, he later, on public television, on news networks, stood in the driveway of the White House and further solicited China to interfere in the election by investigating Joe Biden's son. So you could throw out that first allegation where he was trying to hold money over the Ukraine's head. He's publicly inviting an aggressor nation to interfere with our election. How he didn't get convicted of that is really just mind-boggling.
Yeah, it's stuff like that we'll touch on most likely later, but it sets a dangerous precedent for future presidents of what it means to be president and what you can do and what you can get away with. And this is another example of that.
Yeah, and he, is unique in that he's the first to be impeached twice.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure that's something I'd want to put on my resume.
It's something I've been thinking about a lot, especially with going back and looking at this legacy that will certainly come up. But like my generation and generations around my generation we're living through history for better or worse. And these are things that if I ever have kids and they go to school, the teachers are going to say, go home and ask your parents about when the Capitol was stormed and when the president was impeached twice, like things like that. And I don't know if I want to talk about that, like it's interesting to think of these events. You just see it on Twitter, you see it on the news and things like that, but it's documented history that is going to be in a book someday.
Yeah. And we were there for it. And it's scary. It really is. We were also there for the COVID-19 pandemic. We're still there for it. Trump's handling of COVID-19 will likely go down as one of the biggest disasters in U.S. history. By the time he left office, over 400,000 Americans have died. Trump admittedly downplayed the virus in an interview. He later ignored it completely as he struggled with the election. I mean, from the November election until the day he walked out of office, Trump ignored everything to do with the pandemic, and ignored a lot of his responsibilities as president, because I really think he just had a breakdown at that point. More U.S. citizens have died of COVID than all U.S. soldiers killed in combat in every war since 1945.
I saw that when I was looking over the notes. That is insane.
Yeah. More are dead from COVID than from Vietnam. And Trump completely and repeatedly downplayed the virus. He contradicted top public health experts. He flouted recommendations from his science advisors and his own White House coronavirus task force. He refused to accept responsibility for the pandemic, blaming it even up until his farewell speech on the 20th on China, calling it the China virus. He still won't accept responsibility for it.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, it's like you just got to commit, right? Like,
right.
Because at that point, if you're going to admit that you had any fault, you admit to one thing, you got to admit to it all. But I think, and this is a discussion that's happened a bunch of times by now, but every president has like one or two really big crises in their administration, right?
Yeah.
And this was definitely one of his, and his handling of it was poor.
Yeah.
Regardless of how you fall on the political spectrum, it's hard to disagree with that his handling was terrible and lives were lost because of it.
Well, and it's almost like had he done absolutely nothing, that would have been better than what he did, because he contradicted medical professionals' advice. He made fun of and mocked people who were taking advice from medical professionals to wear masks and social distance. He deliberately exposed his Secret Service detail when he himself contracted COVID so that he could have a publicity stunt driving around the block for the press. Then he returns to the White House, still infected, and makes a show out of taking his mask off and working in the White House with everybody else and exposing everyone else.
Yeah. It's, and I don't know if we have it here, but also pulling out of the World Health Organization was really bad in the middle of a pandemic. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we talked about that on another show as well. We're repeating ourselves, but like just the headline makes itself, right? Trump pulls out of World Health Organization in the middle of a pandemic. Like, why would you do that?
Exactly. Well, and he wasn't taking anyone's advice anyway, so it wouldn't have mattered if we stayed in there. So what's the next thing that we have? Because it sounds like we got a lot more bad than good here, but
yeah, this section is a little long in the tooth, but I feel like we're doing our best here. So the next section is about the U.S. economy. Trump took credit for a robust economy that he inherited when he took office and had shown nearly 10 years of steady growth prior to his election. The U.S. now faces one of the worst economic crises in history, linked to his disastrous response to COVID-19, which we just talked about. Over 22 million jobs were lost. Unemployment is at 7.9%, more than double the 3.4% of the pandemic. The national debt is at the highest level since World War II. And the economic growth of the U.S. will average just above 0% for the first Trump term.
Trump made quite a measure of success by citing the growth of the stock market throughout his presidency. And the funny thing is if you look back over the last 10 years, if you look back over the last two administrations, the Bush and the Obama administration, we had the recession that hit during President Bush's term. Then you had all the bailouts, the controversy over corporations that were too big to fail and the government bailing them out and so forth. But then we went on a steady increase in the economy that grew at a pretty consistent pace year over year, despite what Trump did. You didn't see any spikes in growth under Trump that would mark something significant that he did. But what you did see was all the controversies that came out with Trump. The economy continued to grow. And it grew not because of Trump, but in spite of Trump. Because typically any other president who would have gotten tied up in some of the controversies that he did would have had a direct impact on the economy. And it was almost as though the economy and the world expected this sort of thing from Trump. So they sort of shook it off and it didn't affect the economy. But even then, what you had was the pandemic hit. Your unemployment soared. the country shut down for a period of time, and the country never fully recovered from that. Our unemployment today is more than twice what it was before the pandemic hit. So if there's a measure of success to look at here, it's what the recovery looked like after the crash. And after the last recession that we had, there was significant growth. We've yet to see that in this case here. So the economy, even though the Dow Jones and the stock market's up and that's all great, the economy itself, the jobs themselves that were promised, that Trump has touted over and over again, just haven't materialized.
Yeah, and again, we go back to the, we go back again to the incoming administration and how they're going to, you still have all the negative impacts of the pandemic, which is still going on, and how they're going to deal with that and how they can come back from that. It's a complex thing that is not as easy as, oh, I was president for 4 years. Everything that happened in those 4 years is cut off from what was before me and what is after me. This is what I did. It doesn't work like that.
Right.
And especially when it comes to the economy, which is obviously one of those hot button issues that people love to talk about when they talk about who they're going to vote for or who is a successful president. But it's not as black and white as, some people would like to think it is.
Absolutely. So the last thing that we wanted to kick Donald Trump for here is damaging democracy. So Trump consistently eroded democratic norms during his tenure. Trump's constant attack on the media led UN experts to warn of raised risk of violence against journalists. He's threatened to deploy U.S. troops to American cities and demanded poll workers stop counting ballots to sway the election in his favor. Trump's constant dissemination of disinformation on the electoral process have led historians to draw parallels between him and Benito Mussolini. Trump has refused to accept the clear-cut results of the election and failed to provide any substantial proof to his claims for election fraud. The president is charged now with inciting insurrection at a rally and attempting to prevent a peaceful transfer of power. So now, since I wrote these notes up earlier in the week, additional information has come out that shows not only did Donald Trump incite and encourage his supporters to storm the Capitol, he also has financial ties to several organizations that were part of that shows he's financed those groups to do exactly that. I don't think democracy has ever been threatened like this since the Civil War. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And the difficult part is these are all facts, right, that we've just stated, but I can still guarantee you that there's somewhat half of the country that would disagree with this. And that's where the real damage is, the erosion of a common reality that we all have, right? Because, and I think that is, and I mentioned it before, but I think that that's part of the tactic, is to put so much information, false information out there, and to do all these things that for any other president, any one of them would have got them out of office, most likely, or a terrible scandal. But to just keep doubling down and to keep, moving facts around, it has eroded just average people's way of thinking. And I've seen it in my own life personally, people I know, that we can't even talk about it because we don't agree on the facts and what is real and what is not. And just because I have facts, it makes me, I'm only saying that because I hate Trump. But it's not that's not what is true. And I think that is the thing that we're going to see in the coming years, is this difficulty of telling what is fact and fiction. Even if Trump is no longer in office, I think that stain is going to remain with the country for a while.
Yeah, you could have your own opinion. You're entitled to your own opinion, right, but you're not entitled to your own facts. The facts are the facts. And regardless of how much effort is put forth to disseminate misinformation, to skew those facts, the facts are still there. It's unfortunate that we have to go through the effort, almost like an archaeological dig, to get through all of the lies so we can get down to the facts themselves. And even then, the diehard supporters of someone like Trump still just simply refuse to accept the facts. Whether or not you choose to accept the truth doesn't make it any less true. And there are people out there that are having a very difficult time accepting that. One of the networks we stream on here, we stream on a network called Vaughn Live, and there's a lot of Trump supporters that watch that particular service. And there's been a couple of instances where people, during our replays there, have directly questioned, what are we talking about? Trump won the election in a landslide. And it makes me stop to wonder, despite all of the information that's out there, none of which points to a Trump victory, how could somebody possibly think that he won when not a shred of evidence has been produced, despite there being dozens of court cases that have been shot down by the Supreme Court, mind you, which has a majority of conservative justices that he put on the court, have shot down so many of these lawsuits that he's brought. How could people still think that he won just because that's what they want?
Yeah. And I think, and it's something that I've noticed a lot too, there's a lack of accountability in that mindset where, especially when we had the insurrection at the Capitol, immediately the conspiracies from that side of politics were trying to blaming on Antifa and things like that, where in reality, that's not the case. I don't think there was any evidence for that. It's a lack of accountability where it can't be me. It can't be my fault. And I think that's what you see a lot. And especially now, Trump has made himself out to be a martyr, especially with the election results. And I think that just feeds more into the cycle of a lack of accountability and, Trump can do no wrong. And, it was robbed, it was stolen from him, which none of that is true.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Well, let's take another quick break. We'll come back and we'll have a kind of an open discussion about the lasting effects of Trump and what the future under Joe Biden is going to look like. For over 7 years, the Second Sith Empire has been the premier community guild in the online game Star Wars: The Old Republic. With hundreds of friendly and helpful active members, a weekly schedule of nightly events, annual guild meet and greets, and an active community both on the web and on Discord. The Second Sith Empire is more than your typical gaming group. We're family. Join us on the Starforge server for nightly events such as operations, flashpoints, world boss hunts, Star Wars trivia, guild lottery, and much more. Visit us on the web today at www.thesecondsithempire.com. Welcome back. We are talking about the legacy of Donald Trump. And then we're going to talk about what the lasting effects of Donald Trump are on the world in general. And I'm going to throw a couple of these categories at you, and I want to get your thoughts. So the first thing that I have here I'd like to hear about is, what is the future of the Judiciary and the Supreme Court thanks to Donald Trump?
Well, like we've talked about, he had the 3 Supreme Court judges and what was it, 150? 250 other judges appointed. So that's definitely a lasting impact. I think it's really going to come down to, which is what I said during that segment, was how these judges are going to come down on a lot of decisions. I mean, we saw they don't always just toe the party line like you'd expect with certain things that Trump was trying to get them to do. We just talked about it. I forget what it was, where they
well, for the election.
Yeah. So something like that, if the fear is that they would just follow his orders, that was proven to be false. So I think that shows a somewhat of a hopeful thing where they are impartial, which is what you want from your judges. So hopefully we'll see that continued impartiality.
The one thing that does concern me, though, is you have a man who appointed several hundred judges to lifetime appointments that will affect the judiciary moving forward. And this is the same man who was such a terrible judge of character appointing cabinet members that he had a revolving door on his cabinet and couldn't keep cabinet members. And he had positions where he had 3 and 4 replacements over the course of 4 years. which makes me wonder, how competent and qualified is he to choose a justice that's there for life? Is that something that concerns you at all?
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point, and hopefully, he has not been great at picking people, but based off their character. But hopefully, out of those 250, we'll get a third that are good at their jobs, best, for the hope. But if not, then hopefully the system will do its job, and they'll resign, or we'll find replacements. Hopefully,
that's being very optimistic. Okay.
Well, we're always so doom and gloom, I try to think positively.
How about foreign affairs and our allies? What do you think the lasting effects are going to be on that?
Well, I think initially it's probably going to be negative, but luckily we have the benefit of Joe Biden already having a working relationship with a lot of these people, most likely because of his time as vice president. So I think that is going to help rebuild a lot of the ties that Trump might have severed or damaged or tried to sever. And I think, having Joe Biden as the president might, the rest of the world will see America sort of back on track, hopefully, as having a functional government, a more, not traditional, but a more professional government. And I think that'll hopefully be a good thing for, our allies. And
I agree with you 100% on those points. About the economy and taxes, what do you think we can see long term for that?
Well, we talked about that corporate tax slash. Hopefully that is at least adjusted. I think that's way too much of a slash for corporations. I know you had mentioned that your company, things like that get benefits, but I think big picture, I do think it negatively impacts the most amount of people. For the economy, I think it's probably going to get worse before it gets better until we get coronavirus under control, which hopefully with the new administration we will, now that they're encouraging science and vaccinations are rolling out and things like that. Hopefully, once the virus is stabilized, the economy will also in turn be.
I think you're on the mark there. It's really everything still centers around Corona.
Yeah.
What about immigration? Can we expect long-term effects of his immigration policies?
I think that also kind of ties in with foreign allies and the world's perception of America. Hopefully, Biden will be able to be a little bit more welcoming and to immigration. Now, I know some people are very against any kind of immigration, but I think that taking the stance that Donald Trump did of almost xenophobia, or not almost, xenophobia, is not the way to go about it. And I think even if Biden's going to come down strictly on it, I'm not sure he's going to be as vocal about it.
Sure, yeah. And what about, I specifically mentioned COVID here, but pandemics in general. Do you think the next pandemic, hopefully that won't be for at least another 100 years, do you think the country's going to respond differently than it did during Donald Trump's reign?
I'd say most likely, especially because, looking 100 years back with the Spanish flu, people have such a, it's when you look in a history book and you see all the pictures in black and white, it's not as tangible. But with this, in our modern age, where you have, social media and things that will most likely be able to be looked back on, I think it'll be a lot more real for people. And hopefully, if it's less than 100 years, people like my age or younger will be alive still and will say that, this is not a joke. And hopefully, whatever administration is in power at that time will have learned from past mistakes and, be able to have some sort of pandemic task force, is designed for these things, especially as the world gets more and more globalized every day.
Yeah, here's the hope. And finally, what do you think the long-term impact on the presidency itself is going to be? We just had a president who challenged every norm and every check that's been put in place on the power of the presidency. Do you think there's going to be a lasting effect on the presidency?
Absolutely. And I think that Trump testing all of those limits is going to set like I said before, a dangerous precedent going forward. And I think that even the Biden administration will probably take some liberties with that as well, with what a president can do with things like executive orders or pardons and things like that. Hopefully that extended power will get reeled back, checks and balances and all over time. But I think in the immediate future, it's still going to be a little up in the air on how the presidency is viewed.
Okay. So the future, all right, let's turn our attention to the future under Joe Biden. He's got 4 years. I don't think he's going to do a second term. So he's got 4 years to accomplish what he wants. And the first thing really is to unify a nation that is more divided now than any other time in our history, save for the Civil War. Do you think Joe Biden has what it takes to unify the country, given the staunch support of 70 million people who voted for Donald Trump?
Honestly, I don't know. Because it's just, in his speech during the inauguration, he talked about it not being about parties, which I feel like every president says, but that doesn't work. It's not how that works. And in my experience, I don't think that that's possible. I just think that, and I don't know what it is, but I think people are much too focused on their political parties, and that divides us so much. And I'm not really sure how you can fix that. I think the best way to go about fixing it would be in the government, seeing, handshakes from both parties, agreeing on things. But if that's not going to change, then I don't see how that's going to change for the public either.
I agree. Handling of COVID. So there's been a number of things in the first couple of days of the Biden administration that he signed by executive order to address COVID. Do you feel more confident in Biden's ability to handle COVID than Trump's? Do you think we're going to get ahead of this? Where do you think we're going with this, and are we going in the right direction now?
Overall, I am more confident in Joe Biden. My only fear is that so much damage has already been done by the Trump administration, and how Biden is going to be able to, if he wants to be effective, if he'd be able to be as effective as he can, given the things that Trump has done. Hopefully, using those executive orders, like you said, he'll be able to reverse a lot of that and speed the process up and get vaccinations out and get the resources to people that need it. Again, a lot of hoping. We'll see what actually happens.
So, foreign policy. So you had mentioned already that Joe Biden has an established working relationship with a lot of our allies. Over the 4 years that he was in office, Trump did a lot of damage to those through insults, through pulling out of treaties and military movements and various things. Do you think Joe Biden has it within him to rebuild those alliances in the short time that he's probably going to be in office?
I think, yes, I do. And I think part of that comes from, and it's one of the criticisms people might have of Joe Biden of being a career politician. But I think that when it comes to foreign policy and foreign affairs, being a career politician can be a good thing, because, you saw Trump, who's not as experienced of a political leader, how that worked out dealing with other world leaders. So I think having someone that was already vice president and has met all these people, but has also been in the quote unquote business for his entire life, I think that you pick up some skills along the way that make you a better diplomat, and hopefully that those skills are put to use.
Very good point. So some of those executive orders that Joe Biden has signed into law at this point dealt with undoing some of the things that Donald Trump did. Do you think that Biden should be focused on erasing the Trump legacy, or do you think his efforts would be better focused elsewhere?
Well, I think it's kind of a double-edged sword, because erasing the Trump legacy will also benefit a lot of the American people, especially when it comes to things like the COVID-19 pandemic, because part of Trump's legacy was hindering the process of getting people vaccinated and the resources, like I said, that they need. So I think in those instances where erasing Trump's legacy would benefit the American people, I think that is a good thing. But just turning it into a contest of, if I can erase this guy's name from the books of history, I don't think that's worth your time.
So the last one that I wanted to talk about here is the chance of success. You mentioned that Joe Biden is a career politician. He's been in the White House, administration before as vice president. He's spent, an eternity in the Senate and the legislative branch. So he comes to us with a wealth of experience. But he's also the oldest president to take office at this point in time at 78 years old. Do you think his age is going to contribute to his ability to be successful? And do you think he'll have the support that he needs? Because right now, there's a small majority, but there is a majority of Democrats in the Senate, and there's a majority of Democrats in the House. So the Democrats really hold the power right now, at least for the next 2 years. Will that help his success? Do you think he can be successful in his platform and what he wants to do for the next 4 years?
I've said it before, but I certainly hope so. I do think his age is definitely going to be one of the main points of contention for people that criticize him. I hope that in terms of his mental facilities, he seems like he's all there in his speeches and things like that. He speaks very eloquently, except for a few stutters occasionally, which, people will harp on. But I think in terms of leading, I think he'll do what he needs to do. And I think the people behind him will also be extremely helpful. And the presidency is obviously a huge burden for someone to undertake. We've seen the before and after photos of, when people come into office versus when they leave. I think despite his age, I think he'll be able to, fulfill his duties to the best of his ability.
And I would tend to agree with you, largely because I think he's smart enough to turn his cabinet into an asset rather than a distraction. Mm-hmm. Much of the Trump presidency centered around controversy of cabinet members, cabinet turnover. He didn't trust his cabinet members. He didn't trust the people around him. He was more inclined to make unilateral decisions on his own rather than to trust the experts around him. And I think Joe Biden is smart enough, experienced enough, and wise enough to not fall into those same pitfalls. So I think the team that Joe Biden puts around him is really going to be what contributes to his success more than anything. So we'll take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll get any final thoughts that you have and finish up with the podcast business. Go for your final thoughts.
So I think looking back at the Trump legacy, one of the biggest appeals he had when he went into office was people didn't want another career politician. They wanted something different. And they got that. And it overall, I don't think was a good thing. We've broken it down into various different topics, but I think overall it had a negative impact on the country, right? And you ask yourself, I forget what president did this, but are you better off 4 years? Hang on, I'm messing this up. Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? And I think most people would say no, whether it's for economic reasons or the impact the coronavirus had on them. And obviously you can't blame all these things just on Trump. However, he was the president and he's supposed to be the leader. And I think it's hard to disagree that he failed as a leader. And hopefully, there's obviously detriments to having a career politician in power, but I think now that is what the country most likely needs.
Yeah, I think this was a case of we got what we asked for, and what we asked for was not what we needed. It was a learning experience, I think. The country will continue to feel the effects of for years to come, but I think it's a learning experience that we won't make that same mistake again. That was all we had for today. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you coming to talk about this volatile subject. Before we go, I do want to throw the plugs out there. You can get the audio version of this podcast listed as Insights into Tomorrow. Video versions of all of our podcasts can be found if you look for Insights into Things. We are listed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Amazon, Pandora, and something else that I can't remember. I really need to write all these down.
Tune in?
Tune in, sure.
Sorry, tune in. Sorry about that.
We would also invite you to reach out to us and give us your feedback. You can email us at comments@insightsintothings.com. We are on Twitter at insights_things. We are on Facebook at facebook.com/insightsintothingspodcast. On Instagram, you can find us at insightsintothings, where you can get links to all that and everything else on our website at www.insightsintothings.com. Anything else?
That is it.
All right. Another one in the books. Bye. For 7 years, the Second Sith Empire has been the premier community guild in the online game Star Wars: The Old Republic. With hundreds of friendly and helpful active members, a weekly schedule of nightly events, annual guild meet and greets, and an active community both on the web and on Discord. The Second Sith Empire is more than your typical gaming group. We're family. Join us on the Starforge server for nightly events such as operations, flashpoints, world boss hunts, Star Wars trivia, guild lottery, and much more. Visit us on the web today at www.thesecondsithempire.com.
Insightful podcasts by informative hosts. Insights into Things, a podcast network. Welcome to Insights into Tomorrow, where we take a deeper look into how the issues of today will impact the world of tomorrow. From politics and world news to media and technology, we discuss how today's headlines are becoming tomorrow's reality.
Welcome to Insights into Tomorrow. This is episode 12, The Cryptocurrency Conundrum. I'm your host, Joseph Whalen, and my co-host, Sam Whalen, today.
Hello, everybody.
How you doing today, Sam?
I'm doing okay.
So today we're going to be talking about crypto. Do you own any crypto?
I did for a little bit. I had Dogecoin when that was like a joke.
Yeah, it still is, by the way.
Yeah, but it's kind of settled out because I was using, we'll talk about it, but I was using Robinhood to get it. Yeah. And I think my friends and I all started doing it as a joke. But yeah, I had a little bit of Doge for a while. Not anymore, though.
Okay. Doge actually is not that difficult to generate. It's not like your Bitcoin and stuff like that where it's finite and crypto complicated.
Yeah, I don't know how any of it works, though. That's the point of this show. You'll explain it to all of us in great detail.
Yes, I will, hopefully, in terms that we can all understand. But before we do that, I would suggest folks subscribe to the podcast itself so you get it first thing Monday morning at 8 o'clock when they come out. You can subscribe to the audio version of the podcast by looking us up as Insights into Tomorrow. The video versions of the podcast and all of our network podcasts are listed as Insights into Things. You can get us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, pretty much any place you can get a podcast these days. I would also invite folks to give us your feedback. Email us at comments@insightsintothings.com. Let us know how we're doing on Twitter at insights_things. You can give us feedback on Facebook at facebook.com/insightsintothingspodcast. Shoot us a note on Instagram at Insights into Things, or you can reach out to us on our website at www.insightsintothings.com. So today, what we're going to be doing is we're going to take a look at what cryptocurrency is. We'll understand a little bit about what blockchain technology is. Then we're going to take a look at some of the real-time or real-world impacts that cryptocurrency is having on today's economy and whether it's worth investing in. And then finally, we'll wrap up by looking at how cryptocurrency is changing the world and what the future of crypto looks like. And we'll talk a little bit about a new phenomenon in crypto called NFTs. So hopefully by the time we get done here, we'll all have a good understanding of what crypto is.
And we'll be dumping money into the market to buy some.
Shall we get started?
Yes.
All right. So, what is crypto? So, this definition of crypto comes from NerdWallet. Figure that was kind of a safe place to go to. So, cryptocurrency or crypto is a digital currency that can be used to buy goods and services, but uses an online ledger with strong cryptography to secure online transactions. So when you, unlike a nationalized currency, there's no borders to crypto at this point. It exists entirely online, and it's basically tied up inside of a cryptographic algorithm. Much of the interest in these unregulated currencies is to trade for profit, with speculators at times driving prices skyward, as we've seen recently with Bitcoin. Many companies have issued their own currencies, often called tokens, and these can be traded specifically for goods or services that company provides. Everyone's familiar with microtransactions, and nowadays you can buy currency with a company that you then use to buy things inside that company. It's no different than when you used to go to the arcade, and the arcade machines didn't take quarters, they took tokens. So you put a dollar bill in a machine and got 4 tokens out instead of 4 coins. And that kind of kept that money tied up inside of that establishment. So cryptocurrencies also use technology called blockchain. So we'll talk about blockchain in a second. That's really the driving technology behind blockchain. But part of the appeal of cryptocurrency is the security of it. A lot of people feel the anonymity that cryptocurrency offers is a selling point, because you can go out and make a transaction, a purchase online somewhere, and not have that traced back to you through a PayPal account or a credit card or something else. But what people don't realize is it's not as untraceable as they think it is, because there is a digital footprint. There's a digital trail that goes along with it that can be traced back to your wallet, because you have to have a digital wallet that you apply these coins to. So, with that in mind, questions, statements, inquiries?
No, I think that all makes sense. I mean, my familiarity with Bitcoin is mostly from the last season of Mr. Robot, actually, which ended a while ago. But in that show, the economy basically tanks. And this one company, E-Corp, comes up with E-Coin, which is basically takes the place of physical money. So everybody has their E-Coin wallet on their phone. So I kind of got the concept a little bit from that. I mean, it's a fictionalized portrayal, but they did their research in terms of, using Bitcoin as a replacement for physical money.
Sure. And really, I mean, money is, currency itself is anything that has a value associated with it that you can trade for things. Whether it's paper money that we have, whether it's gold coins because the material that it's made from has a value associated with it, or nowadays with U.S. currency where there isn't a backing to it. There's no silver or gold backing to it. There's an intrinsic value based on the current economic state. So as a result, the dollar goes up and down depending on what our trade state is and other factors in the world. Cryptocurrency is the same sort of scenario, but it's affected by things very differently. Like one of the things that we're seeing nowadays is Bitcoin is soaring right now. And one of the reasons it took a recent jump was Tesla, Elon Musk's company, decided that they're going to take Bitcoin payment for cars, and they invested more than $1 billion to acquire Bitcoin. Well, anytime a commodity is purchased in volumes like that, the cost of it goes up just because of the perceived value of it at that point. So you have speculative investment like that that's causing a rise in value.
Yeah, that happened with, we talked about Dogecoin earlier too. Elon Musk would make a tweet about Dogecoin and it would shoot up 20 cents or something like that.
Sure.
So and you get that with regular stocks too, but with crypto, it's even more volatile like that.
Well, and Elon Musk is a great person to pick on because he's the type of person who stock in Tesla goes up significantly, and then he tweets and says, "Oh, well, that's overvalued," and then the stock plummets. Mm-hmm. And when you're the second richest man in the world, you can stand to lose $40 billion and it doesn't really put a dent in your bank account, but your other investors can't afford that kind of recklessness and that volatility in a stock that they're investing in. And we'll talk later about the investment angle of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, but we're going to find that's the same type of thing with crypto. So the technology that it is based on is blockchain. Now, this information comes from another website, Investopedia.com. Blockchain is a decentralized technology spread across many computers that manages and records transactions. Blockchain is a specific type of database. It differs from a typical database in the way it stores information. Blockchains store data in blocks that are then chained together.
Blockchain. I get
blockchain. Once a block is filled with data, it's chained onto the previous block, which makes the data chained together in a chronological order. So one of the problems that you have with this is that as you continue to mine coin in a blockchain, the blockchain gets larger and larger and larger, which requires more storage capacity, it requires more bandwidth to handle, it requires more computing power as it gets progressively larger. Different types of information can be stored on a blockchain, but the most common use so far has been as a ledger for these transactions. In Bitcoin's case, blockchain is used in a decentralized way so that no single person or group has control. Rather, all users collectively retain control. So when you're going to mine Bitcoin, you download whatever the current version of that blockchain is, the entire thing. And as you're churning through it and you fill up the block itself, you're sending that data back out to this collection of computers.
So when we're talking about downloading it, is this like terabytes, petabytes? I don't know, how big does it get?
I don't know what the last count was, but you're talking a massive amount of data right now. Like it would take, I think I was looking at numbers earlier, and it took 8 hours or so over a gigabit line to download the current one. Once you have it, though, you get incremental updates to it. But that's just a sign of how large this is. And the larger it is, the more computations have to be done. So the problem a lot of people are running into is that in order to mine Bitcoin now, people are using very sophisticated hardware. In fact, NVIDIA just came out with their latest line of video cards, and they cryptographically crippled them through a driver update so they couldn't be used for blockchain, because what's happening is you're actually burning more energy in computational power and cooling to run these machines than you're generating in actual funds. So it's environmentally it's not a good thing. I mean, we're not drilling another hole in the ozone or anything, but this is not going down the right path. So in Bitcoin's case, the blockchain's used as a way to store the ledger on here, and the decentralized blockchains are themselves immutable, which means that once the data is entered, it can't be changed. And for Bitcoin, this means that transactions are permanently recorded and viewable to anyone. And that's where that lack of anonymity comes from. Because in order for this whole system to work, you have to use a shared database for these transactions. Now, your existence in here is probably some, 64 character long random GUID number, not, Sam. So there's that level of anonymity. But it also records origins of these. So it can tell geographically by your IP address where it's coming from. So when you process something on the blockchain, it knows what your ID is. It might not know who you are, but it can see where you're at. So a lot of cyber forensic analysis is going into some of these, because a lot of people in the criminal underworld are using Bitcoin to fund their terrorist organizations and criminal organizations because of that level of security. So as a result, federal authorities and government authorities around the world are developing new tools to try to de-anonymize some of these transactions to track it down so that they can generate evidence against criminals. So that's really what blockchain is. It's the technology behind, it's the database behind cryptocurrency. Questions, comments?
No, I mean, it seems relatively straightforward so far. Yeah, so my only thing is, like, how does this translate into actual value? Because, like, I understand how you get it and how it's made, but, like, is it just because there's so much of it that it gives it value?
It's not that there's so much, it's that there's so little. So, for instance, if you look at Bitcoin, the way that you compute or the way that you mine Bitcoin computationally, there's a finite number of Bitcoins that are out there. And the more that are found, the fewer that can be found. So it's almost like, think of it like a baseball card. 10 Ricky Henderson rookies are made. That's all that will ever be made. And they're all in packages that are sitting in stores. So when the first one gets purchased, it's worth, say, $1,000. But when the second one gets purchased, you know that there's only 8 more out there. So the value of the ones that are found go up until all 10 are found. And then there's a fixed value because they exist. They're the only ones that are going to exist.
So that's why you have Tesla getting a bunch of it.
Exactly.
And then it skyrockets.
The problem that you run into is as people trade it and buy and sell and companies start to adopt it as an actual currency, it gets more precious because you have a finite pool of resources now that are now being traded in large blocks.
So people fight over it, and then
exactly. Then you have governments. Like, for instance, Russia has outlawed Bitcoin. So you can't use Bitcoin in Russia to do anything. Where in the United States, I could spend Bitcoin to buy a pizza. It's literally that simple. And in the early days of Bitcoin, it was used very frivolously. It was generated a lot on colleges because a lot of college students would use computers on campus because of the computational power to generate these. So you'd have students that would have 10 Bitcoins that would generate overnight. Then they'd want to order pizza. Well, they didn't have any cash, so the local pizzeria would accept Bitcoin. So you'd spend 2 Bitcoin to buy a pizza.
And 1 Bitcoin now is worth like $10,000 or something like that.
Right. So you have people that spent over $20,000 on pizzas when they were in college. So that's why the volatility of it kind of makes for opportunities, but it also makes for misuse of the currency as well. So we're going to take a quick break and we'll come back and we'll talk about what the impact of cryptocurrency is on today's society.
Insights into Entertainment, a podcast series taking a deeper look into entertainment and media. Our husband and wife team of pop culture fanatics are exploring all things from music and movies to television and fandom. We'll look at the interesting and obscure entertainment news of the week. We'll talk about theme park and pop culture news. We'll give you the latest and greatest on pop culture conventions. We'll give you a deep dive into Disney, Star Wars, and much more. Check out our video episodes at youtube.com/insightsintothings. Our audio episodes at podcast.insightsintoentertainment.com, or check us out on the web at insightsintothings.com.
Today on Insights into Tomorrow, I find the button on the board to actually hit the right scene. Today we're talking about cryptocurrency, and we're going to talk a little bit about the impact of cryptocurrency on today's economy. So we've talked about Bitcoin, we've talked about Dogecoin a little bit. There's actually more than 6,700 different cryptocurrencies that are traded publicly today. And this is according to coinmarketcap.com. Cryptocurrencies continue to proliferate, raising money through initial coin offerings. You've heard of IPOs, initial public offerings for stocks. ICOs are what crypto coins actually use to generate their funds. The total value of all cryptocurrencies as of February 18th, 2021 was more than $1.6 trillion according to CoinMarketCap. And the total value of all Bitcoins, the most popular digital currency, was pegged at about $969 billion. Now, you can't have that much market cap and not have a huge influence over the economy. I mean, I can't, it's hard for me to imagine another segment of the economy other than like Apple, that's $1 trillion company, that has that kind of influence over it. So just that value alone gives you a footprint and a place at the table that countries, I mean, that's more value than most countries in the world actually have as far as value goes. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, that's an astounding amount of wealth. And like going back to the pizza analogy from earlier, like to think that it's come from that, using it to get a pizza to $969 billion in what, 20 years?
Yeah, not even that.
Yeah, less than that. It's just interesting, and stocks in general, or the market, how that works, it all kind of mystifies me. It seems like it's gambling with extra steps, and like how things get value, and in this case, how things can skyrocket in value over time. It fascinates me, but it's not something I have any idea how to get involved in.
Well, and that's one of the things, that's one of the real distinguishing factors between a cryptocurrency and a stock. A stock is a piece of something. It's a piece of a company. And its value is based on the value of that company, its revenue, its profit, and how that company is being run. And all that information, when you're a publicly traded company, is publicly available. So if you want to go do the research on Intel and see how much Intel is worth, you can see what their assets are, what their liabilities are, what their profits are, what contracts they've landed over the last 12 months. You can do all that research and find all that information. And largely that's what, analysts and stockbrokers do for you. They do all that work for you and come back and say, okay, buy Intel because they're worth it. But you have the freedom to go get that information yourself and do it. You lack that information for the most part when it comes to crypto. I mean, crypto isn't representative of anything substantial. It's literally data that's being passed around. And a lot of people have a very difficult time wrapping their heads around that. It's hard to understand why you would need something like that. Granted, you can have a currency that doesn't have borders. So for instance, you have the euro versus the dollar. And the euro traditionally trends a few cents higher in value than the dollar does, depending on what's going on from a geopolitical standpoint. But that currency itself is based on gross domestic product. It's based on manufacturing output. There's a measurable metric that you can look at for it. So you can kind of predict, okay, well, we know that everyone's being hit by the pandemic right now. And sections of Europe are being hit worse than others. So the chances are their economy is going to be impacted by that further. So maybe now is not a good time. And I'm saying this strictly from a theoretical standpoint. I am not an investment broker, or am I qualified to comment on any of this stuff? But you can see these signs, these trends, and determine that might not be the investment that you want because the euro may go down as their economy is impacted. You can't do that with Bitcoin. Tomorrow, Bitcoin could lose 30% for no apparent reason. Or it could gain 30%. For equally no reason.
It's volatile.
That is
it's the
incredibly.
buzzword, yeah.
incredibly volatile. So why do people like cryptocurrency? Why don't you tell us, why people, what the appeal of cryptocurrency is?
Yeah, so supporters see cryptocurrency, things like Bitcoin, as a currency of the future, and they're racing to buy them now before they become more valuable, which we've already seen that with going from buying pizzas to being worth, $900 some billion. Some supporters like the fact that crypto removes central banks from managing the money supply, since over time these banks tend to reduce the value of money through inflation, so Bitcoin can't be inflated the way normal money can. Other supporters like the technology behind crypto, like the blockchain, which we talked about earlier, because it's decentralized processing and recording system and can be more secure than usual payment options. And then finally, some speculators like crypto because they're going up in value and have no interest in the currency's long-term acceptance as a way to move money.
And that's a very good point, is that if you look at it from a long-term standpoint, it's so volatile and traded so frequently that people aren't looking at it as a long-term. Like people buy Disney stock and they hold on the Disney stock for 30 years and they continue to increase in value. They may get dividends from it, but ultimately it's a long-term thing that someday you'll sell that and it's an investment. Whereas cryptocurrency is almost like day trading.
Yeah.
I'm buying it this morning because I know this afternoon chances are it's going to be 30% higher and I'm going to make a fortune off of it.
That's essentially what I was doing. Me and my friends, when I talked about Dogecoin earlier, that's what we would do. We bought it, and then for like a week straight, we would check every day to see what the value was. And you could set, in the app we were using, you could set, I think it was called a limit order. So like if Dogecoin went up to 80 cents, you can have it sell then.
Right.
So like if we thought Elon Musk was going to tweet about it and it would make it go up in value, which happened, a lot of people made a lot of money when Dogecoin, when that phenomenon was happening.
Sure.
It's kind of stabled out now, but it was like day trading. And Robinhood, I know, got a lot of flack for that because so much money was being dumped in that they couldn't keep up with it. And I think that finding came out a couple of days ago, where the way Robinhood works is when you go into, and for those that don't know, Robinhood is an app where you can, trade stocks and trade crypto. When you go to buy something through them, they actually wait and basically give you an IOU so that if they can get a better value for it, they can then take that and then you also get the stock. They take off the top.
Right.
But when the things with Dogecoin was happening, so many people were buying in, and with GameStop as well, the GameStop stock situation, they didn't have enough money to keep up. So it's like, when the trend hits the whole world and everybody's doing it like day trading, it can cripple something like Robinhood that's just, the app to the middleman almost.
Yeah, their business model was not capable of keeping up with that. But one of the other things about crypto that we talk about here is that it doesn't use a centralized bank, which means it can't be influenced by governments or government regulation. So you look at how some of the economy works in the United States, and you've got the Federal Trade Commission that makes sure that there's no insider trading and that things are done on the up and up. You have the Federal Reserve that sets interest rates. So with a traditional economy, you have a lot of outside influence. It's not just the market value. A lot of it is the government trying to control the money. Part of that's inflation. When the economy is bad, the government puts more currency into circulation, which devalues the currency but increases spending. And with a cryptocurrency, they don't have that control, which is one of the reasons why Russia had banned Bitcoin, because Bitcoin could really come in and take over an economy because the government has no control over it. So a lot of governments don't understand crypto yet, and those that do and have kind of a good understanding of it are kind of afraid of it, and with good reason. Yeah. One of the other things that we talk about here is the encryption associated with it. Well, that encryption allows you to hide transactions. So right now we've got a big push in the United States where the federal government wants to have access to encrypted data on your phone, in your email, through your social media, because they claim that without that, then they can't do their job from a law enforcement perspective. So the federal government wants access to your encrypted information on your phone. So if they get a warrant for a search warrant, they can execute it, where they can't do that now. Well, they'll never be able to do that with cryptocurrency. They can't go to a manufacturer like Apple or Google and say, put a backdoor in, or we're going to put you out of business. There's no central authority for Bitcoin. So they can't exercise that control. And as a result, it's very appealing to a lot of people who want to do international transactions. You know, when we do transactions with a company overseas, there's a conversion rate that happens. And that conversion makes money for someone. Some money broker somewhere skims off the top, like you talked about with Robinhood. With Bitcoin, it's traded at face value. Nobody skims off the top. Nobody makes a profit off of it. And generally, when no one's making a profit off of a transaction, people have a problem with that.
Yeah.
So you can't have that man in the middle who's doing things. But again, cryptocurrencies are speculative. There's nothing tangible about a cryptocurrency that says, okay, well, I see that Tesla put out 20% more cars this year than they had forecast, so their value is going to go up. There's nothing like that with crypto. It's literally just made up as it goes along. And that's something that scares off investors. So what you get is a completely different class of investors that go after cryptocurrencies. As an investor myself, I'm very risk averse. You know, I will invest money in a guaranteed 8% return any day over the possibility of a 15% return with a 50% chance of loss. That's just the way I am. I'll always go for the sure thing.
I mean, like, I've been investing a little bit. Like, I don't, as I've made clear by this show, I don't really understand how a lot of this stuff works. So I've been using Robinhood, and they got in trouble for kind of gamifying it. But I like that personally because it makes it a lot easier to understand. And the way I've been trading it is like gambling, where if you're putting money in, like, you have to be okay to lose it if you mess something up, or like you're okay having it sit there for a long time. Cause you know, a lot of stocks are, like you talked about with the Disney example, a long-term thing. So I haven't been doing it enough to understand how I do it. But at least with the crypto stuff, I was doing it daily, trying to get like just the smallest amount of value out of it. Where it's not a set 8%, you know, a guaranteed 8% return like you were talking about. So it is weird seeing the comparison of, you know, play it safe long term, but with crypto, it's play it now and hope for the best.
Absolutely. So I guess the real overriding question is, are cryptocurrencies a good investment? So like we said, cryptocurrencies may go up in value, but many investors see them as more speculations and not real investments. And the reason for that is that just like real currencies, cryptocurrencies generate no cash flow. So for you to profit, someone has to pay more for the currency than you did, which is called the greater fool principle. Yeah, I love that one.
That's a funny name.
And it's a legitimate theory for investing. But if you contrast that to a well-managed business, which increases its value over time by growing the profitability and cash flow of an operation, experts note that cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin may not be that safe. And some notable voices in the investment community have advised would-be investors to steer clear of them. Because it's gambling.
Yeah, it's just gambling.
You hit the nail on the head. You're probably better off going to Vegas and betting, you know, $5,000 on black at the roulette than you aren't putting it in to cryptocurrency. Of a particular note, Warren Buffett compared Bitcoin to paper checks, saying, quote, it's a very effective way of transmitting money, and you can do it anonymously and all that. A check is a way of transmitting money too. Are checks worth a lot of money just because they can transmit money? And I think that really boils it down, because in order to do anything with Bitcoin, you either have to generate them through very complex, very costly computational efforts, or you need to buy them. So if you invest the money to buy them, you've paid somebody money for money. Really.
Yeah.
And you're paying that conversion rate.
Mm-hmm.
If you generate it, then you're paying the money to actually, it's not free. Like a lot of people think that, and that's part of the problem is that people think that, oh, well, cryptocurrency, I can generate that, I can quote unquote mine that on my computer. Well, I already own the computer, so it's costing me nothing. If I can mine 3 Bitcoin, that's a fortune. Well, you're not mining for nothing. You're paying the electric bill. You're paying to cool it because it generates so much heat to do these computations. People have actually turned mining computers into heaters for their homes.
Oh, wow.
What they've done is they build a computer with 5 or 6 graphic processor units, high-grade graphics processor units, and they channel that heat into their house, and that's how they heat their house.
That's insane.
I saw one person who lived out in Colorado or something like that, and he actually funneled the heat from his cryptocurrency computer to a chicken coop, and that heats the chicken coop outside.
Well, there you go.
But that's no different than, because you're still paying to use that power. One of the latest trends now is they're putting a lot of crypto mining farms in Alaska so they don't have to pay for the cooling costs. So they're just pulling,
put them in the ice.
Yeah, they're pulling outdoor air in, and that's cooling these machines off.
Yeah, I know there was this was a while ago, probably like a year ago, but the Nintendo Switch had a thing, the gaming console, where people couldn't figure out why when they played this one game, it was like some cooking game, why their Switches kept overheating. And it was because they were using it to mine Bitcoin in the background for the game. So people's Switches would overheat and turn off, and they couldn't figure out why, because it's not like, the Switch is like that big. It's not like it's a PS5 or something. Yeah. So people were like, what's going on here? And they looked into it, and they were mining Bitcoin in the background when you played the game. It was insane.
Yeah. Yeah, it's scary. It really is. Yeah. For those who see cryptocurrency such as Bitcoin as the currency of the future, it should be noted that a currency needs stability so that merchants and consumers can determine what a fair price for goods is. So let's take the instance of Tesla. So they're going to be selling a car, and they're going to price the cost in Bitcoin out to what the equivalent dollar value would be. So let's say, for instance, you buy a Tesla for $80,000. Let's say that's, for the sake of easy math, that's 8 Bitcoin. All right. Say Bitcoin's at $10,000 each. Well, if Bitcoin drops in value at any point in time while you're still paying for that car, then you just got, like, if it drops to 5,000 per Bitcoin, you just paid half price for that car. What merchant is going to deal with a currency that's that volatile and that prone to have them lose money? Like, it just, for Tesla to go that route, I think puzzled a lot of people.
Do you think that it's going to end up becoming regulated if enough businesses get involved? Do you think it's just going to sidestep the government and they're just going to regulate it themselves? Especially if they have the majority of it, like a Tesla or another big corporation?
Well, and that's actually a very interesting proposition. You can't regulate it. You can't, because of its decentralized nature. So even if you own the majority of it, like owning the majority of a company, you control that company. If you own the majority of Bitcoin, you can't dictate the price of Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is only worth what the market will bear. So if Tesla owned 60% of the available Bitcoin out there, they could ask whatever they want. But if nobody wants to pay that value, then it's not worth that, right? Like, think of selling on eBay. Oh, I can put my Star Wars figures up on eBay and ask $5,000 for them. Doesn't mean they're worth $5,000 if nobody's going to buy them. And that's what you're looking at with Bitcoin, is that you can't deregulate. So I don't know why at this point in time someone like Elon Musk would get into it, if for no other reason than just for publicity.
I'm pretty sure he had an SEC filing the other day where they have to call him like Crypto King now or something like that.
Yeah, I saw that.
Which one of my friends, it was half joking, but he was like, well, that's so they don't have to say he's a CEO. So when he does dumb stuff like this, he can say, well, I'm not CEO, I'm the Crypto King.
Right.
It's different.
Right. But I don't know. He does things like, I mean, this is the man who sold flamethrowers to promote his boring company, his mining company. So
we could do a whole show on him if we wanted to.
Yeah.
He's like Tony Stark, but not as cool.
But as we said, Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies have been anything but stable through much of their history. For example, while Bitcoin traded close to $20,000 in December 2017, by 2020 it was trading at record levels. It dropped as low as $3,200 later that year. That's 70% of your value. That's ridiculous to have a drop like that. And then by 2020, it was back at record levels again. So the price volatility creates a conundrum. Hence the title to the show.
Hey-o.
See, you
Full
made fun of me
circle.
for the title.
I did make fun. It was funny.
If Bitcoins might be worth a lot more in the future, people are less likely to spend and circulate them today. So I'm going to stop buying pizzas with my Bitcoin. I'm going to hold on to them, making them less viable as a currency. So think of it almost like a commodity, like gold. So gold rarely drops in value. And what happens is a lot of people buy gold and they hold on to it because it's a good investment because it doesn't drop in value. Nobody deals in gold as a currency anymore. It's not practical to deal in it. But because it's stable, people are going to hold on to that and use that to back other ventures. Because this is volatile and could drop or increase dramatically, people don't want to spend that because they don't want to spend $20,000 on a pizza. Even though it may only be $20 today, a year from now it could be $20,000. So it doesn't lend itself to being used to transmit money. And finally, they say, why spend a Bitcoin when it would be worth 3 times that value next year? And that's exactly what they're saying. It's more an investment gimmick, I think, than it is a real currency.
So then do you think it will go by the wayside eventually? If people adopt this line of thinking that it's not worth the effort to spend it?
I think Bitcoin has a very limited lifetime to it. I think cryptocurrency in general does. I think blockchain has other practical applications that can be used for more realistic things. I think what we're seeing right now with crypto is probably a fad because it's just too unstable. Yeah. Investors don't like instability. So you're going to find that it's going to probably lose its widespread adoption pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. But let's take a quick break and we'll come back and we'll look at what we do think of what the future of cryptocurrency is and how it's changing the world.
Insights into Teens, a podcast series exploring the issues and challenges of today's youth. Talking to real teens about real teen problems. Explore issues from braces to puberty, social anxiety to financial responsibility. Each week, we talk about the topics concerning today's youth. We look at how the issues affect teens, how to cope with these issues, and how parents, friends, and loved ones can help teens handle these challenges. Check out our video episodes on youtube.com/insightsintothings. Catch our audio versions on podcast.insightsintoteens.com or on the web at insightsintothings.com.
Welcome back to Insights into Tomorrow. We're talking cryptocurrency. And as we said earlier, cryptocurrency is not new. It's been around since roughly 2009 when Bitcoin was first created. But in recent years, it started to have a more significant impact on the world. Cryptocurrency has done this by changing the way various industries operate and opening up new opportunities for individuals and businesses alike. The creation of cryptocurrency also introduced blockchain technology to the world, which is, I think, the most significant contribution that we get from crypto. According to Statista, revenues from the technology are expected to reach more than $39 billion by 2025, From these figures, it's clear that cryptocurrencies and the technology that surround them are having a major impact. Here are some of the examples of how cryptocurrencies changing the world. Why don't you tell us about these?
Sure. So alternative international financial transactions, which we kind of talked about earlier with it being a borderless currency. Businesses are always keen to find a way to complete international transactions in the most secure way possible. So cryptocurrency-based solutions like Ripple can help with this. Ripple operates on an open source platform, and it enables the seamless transfer of both cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Litecoin and fiat money like USD and yen. I don't know what fiat money is.
Fiat money is national currency.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that was a term for it. And then finally, the main process of Ripple is payment, settlement, and remittance that is similar to the traditional SWIFT system, which is used by financial institutions. What is the SWIFT system also?
Well, SWIFT system we're not going to go into today.
Okay.
That's a lot more complicated.
Okay. Yeah, we'll get an economist next time to break that down for us.
Yes.
Second, more options for secure online payments. Cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology can make it easier for people to make online payments. Blockchain wallets store private and public keys that enable payments to be made securely and quickly. Also, many sites in various industries accept cryptocurrencies as a safe way for people to send and deposit money. So, for example, online gambling sites that accept cryptocurrencies are popular among young adults and in general with players due to the added security that is provided. The worldwide online payment system PayPal has also recently announced that it is going to start allowing customers to buy, sell, and hold cryptocurrencies in its online wallets. PayPal was Elon Musk, right? He invented that?
I believe that's where he started.
So yeah, another Elon, he's back. Another mention of him. Revolutionizing supply chains. So Bitcoin, the global economy, is reliant on secure and efficient supply chains. This makes supply chain security a major concern. The blockchain technology that enables the use of crypto can also be used to improve the security of supply chains thanks to its transparency and decentralized nature. Certain currencies like Walton Chain and VeChain, or VeChain, are specifically aimed at improving the safety and speed of supply chain operation. Providing a platform for creatives, it can often be difficult for professionals like musicians to sell content without interference from middlemen like producers. So they can use crypto like XRP to allow them to sell content directly to consumers. This is because consumers can access the content and pay for it using a real-world payment solution. That's an interesting note. I never thought of that, of how it can be used to actually help people that might be, scammed by a producer or something like that. Changing the way NGOs deal with money. Non-governmental organizations, NGOs, engage with crypto as a way of getting currency to underprivileged areas of the world. During the current crisis, the Red Cross in Italy has also started accepting Bitcoin donations from people in order to boost its fund and help it provide the support that people need. So using it for more humanitarian efforts.
Sure. And the other thing we kind of have to make note of here is that we talk a lot about Bitcoin because that's in the news a lot. And Bitcoin's a form of crypto, but it's obviously not the only version. Crypto in general can be used for other different things depending on how it's generated. Like, for instance, we talked how Bitcoin has a finite number of Bitcoins that you can ever get out of the blockchain. But other currencies like Dogecoin, it's unlimited. So you can continue to generate Dogecoin, which is why the value never really soars, because there's an infinite amount of it out there. But it's also a legitimate form of currency because it is digitally signed through a very strong encryption. So something like that, you can easily use that to do electronic transactions back and forth online, or to transfer large sums of money, or things like that, where you want to have secure, borderless transactions. That's not to say that Bitcoin's the best crypto for that, but crypto can be used for these things. It does away with that decentralized bank. It does away with these conversions. It does away with the regulations that you get bogged down in. One example, which is probably not a good example, is North Korea. Okay, so North Korea is under all kinds of sanctions. They can't trade, tea at this point in time without having some kind of sanction slapped on them. But they can trade crypto because it's unregulated.
Yeah.
There's no way to stop that.
I didn't even think of that.
Now, that's a bad example of that, but the good example of that is if you're in a oppressive third world regime. that you're trying to fight for the freedom of the people there and the government is oppressing you. You can fund those operations through cryptocurrencies and still manage to get the funds that you need.
Yeah, it sort of cuts out the red tape and the middleman and all that to just get them the currency where it needs to be.
Exactly. I think personally moving forward, cryptocurrencies themselves are going to be more of a medium than they are an asset or an investment. They're going to be used for transactions. Like a lot of business transactions use EFT fund transactions now, and you get a lot of hands touching that type of stuff through the banking industries. And I think cryptocurrencies eliminate a lot of that stuff. So I think there's a future for cryptocurrencies. I think it's very different than what we see today. I think we're going to see them take on a different role. I think we're going to see them be used by different people for different reasons. I don't think they're going to be a viable investment anytime in the near future just because of the volatility. But one of the things that we are seeing crypto use for, and again, this is a different use of blockchains, is something called an NFT or a non-fungible token. And these are a type of cryptocurrency created on smart contract platforms such as Ethereum. And they're unique digital objects that can be cool to own or even profitable to trade.
Like it's World of Warcraft or something.
Similar to that. I mean, you joke, really? But it's similar to that. But for instance, Elon Musk's girlfriend was just in the news because she put up $8 million in artwork as NFTs. The NBA is involved in this. You can purchase an NFT, a non-fungible token of an NBA highlight, and you own that highlight.
Like the footage?
No, just the rights to the highlight.
Okay.
This is where it gets confusing.
Yeah, I'm kind of lost.
Think of it as, let's go back to the analogy of baseball cards. All right. So as a kid, I would buy baseball cards. You'd go out to the store, you'd buy a pack of them. You'd open them up and you'd see what card you got. And if you got a rookie card of somebody that you knew was good, you held on to it and it had value. I could take that to a trading card store somewhere and sell it. This is sort of the same type of thing, but you never get the card. So, for instance, you pay for an NFT, and that NFT happens to be for, I say Ricky Henderson because that's the only valuable baseball card I ever owned. So you pay for a token, a digital token for Ricky Henderson's rookie card. And that card stays in the store in the window, and everyone can come by and they can look at that and they can gawk at it and they can ooh and ah and everything, but nobody can have it. They can just see it. You own it. Now you can trade it to someone else. You can sell it to someone else. You can sell that right to it, but you never actually own it.
That sounds lame. Why would you want to do that? Especially if it's like Grimes' artwork. Wouldn't you want to hang artwork like in your house? You just have a thing that says you own the artwork. You don't own the art.
Well, and that's like, you can have copies of it, but you own the right to that item itself. So no one else can own the right to it.
It seems like a pyramid scheme or something.
And that's how it's been described.
You own
by
the
a lot
idea
of
art.
That's how it's been described. So what is fungible and non-fungible?
You're asking me?
Yes.
Oh, well, conveniently enough, we have a very well-produced show notes. Cryptocurrencies can be fungible, meaning all the currency's unit, i.e. tokens, are the same and equal, like grains of rice or dollars. Non-fungible tokens are the opposite. Every cryptocurrency unit or token is unique and cannot be replicated. This, quote, non-fungible property can be used for many things, even certain types of currencies. But the current NFT craze is mostly fueled by digital art and collectibles, kind of like we talked about. People have figured out that a unique digital object can be interesting, cool, and even have a significant monetary value. It's why the space has recently blossomed, encompassing thousands of projects involving artworks, gaming, and sports.
So how do NFTs work? So it really depends on the platform, right? So given the vast majority of NFTs that are created and traded on Ethereum, let's focus on that. So NFTs created on Ethereum's blockchain, which is immutable, meaning it can't be altered, like we've talked about all blockchains. No one can undo your ownership of an NFT or recreate the same one. They're also quote, permissionless. So anyone can create, buy, or sell an NFT without asking for permission. So if you're an artist, you can create your own NFTs. You don't have to license it through someone else.
So how does that work with like the NBA?
So the NBA creates their NFTs for these highlights.
Okay.
And they're the only ones that can create their NFTs.
Right. Gotcha.
They're the authority for it. Every NFT is unique and can be viewed by anyone, just like that card in the window. Anyone can walk by the window. So again, it's like the analogy I gave you with having a card that's forever available for people to use. I don't know why people would do it.
Yeah.
People are doing it. There's a huge budding industry, which is why I threw it in at the end of the notes here, because it kind of was an afterthought in my research in doing this. But I wanted to put it in here as another example of how blockchain itself is being used without it being technically a cryptocurrency. And I guess, let's take a step back and talk about where we think it's going to go. So we're going to take a quick break. Our last break, we'll come back and we'll talk about what the future of cryptocurrency is going to look like. For over 7 years, the Second Sith Empire has been the premier community guild in the online game Star Wars: The Old Republic. With hundreds of friendly and helpful active members, a weekly schedule of nightly events, annual guild meet and greets, and an active community both on the web and on Discord. The Second Sith Empire is more than your typical gaming group. We're family. Join us on the Starforge server for nightly events such as operations, flashpoints, world boss hunts, Star Wars trivia, guild lottery, and much more. Visit us on the web today at www.thesecondsithempire.com. Investopedia.com says that the economic analysts predict a big change in crypto is forthcoming as institutional money enters the market. There's the possibility of crypto will be floated on the NASDAQ, which would further add credibility to blockchain and its uses as an alternative to conventional currencies. Some predict that all crypto needs to be a verified exchange-traded fund, an ETF. An ETF would definitely make it easier for people to invest in Bitcoin, but there still needs to be the demand to want to invest in crypto, which might not automatically be generated with a fund. What do you think? Where do you think we're going to go with crypto based on the discussion that we had here? What do you think its future is?
Well, I didn't know a whole lot about it going in, and I've definitely learned a lot today. So I said I'd probably agree with a lot of what you're saying, is that it seems like it's the blockchain element of it seems like it's useful and can be used for lots of other things. But breaking it down in terms of the actual reasons to invest in it, and there not really being that many, and the volatility of it too, I think unless there's a change in that and how that works, which I don't know how you do that, it seems like, the best thing we're getting out of this is the blockchain technology.
Right. Yeah. And Investopedia looks specifically at the outlook for Bitcoin. And they say the future outlook for Bitcoin is it's subject to much debate, which we kind of agreed on here. While the financial media is proliferated by so-called crypto evangelists, Harvard University professor of economics and public policy, Kenneth Rogoff, suggests the, quote, overwhelming sentiment among crypto advocates is that the total market capitalization of cryptocurrencies could explode over the next 5 years, rising to $5 to $10 trillion, which is, astronomical. The historic volatility of the asset class is no reason to panic, he says. So he tempered his optimism with that of the crypto evangelists' view of Bitcoin as digital gold, calling it, quote, nutty.
Yeah, that's the official economist term.
That is the official term, yeah. stating its long-term value is more likely to be $100 than $100,000. Rogoff argues that unlike physical gold, Bitcoin's use is limited to transactions, which makes it more vulnerable to a bubble-like collapse. Additionally, the cryptocurrency's energy-intensive verification process is vastly less efficient than systems that rely on a trusted central authority like a central bank. And I think that's really a great place to make that distinction, is that the value or the viability of a Bitcoin is in its computational authority, whereas the value of a traditional currency or stock is in its institutional authority. And being decentralized with no institutional authority, you have to rely on that encryption to know what the value is and to know that it's a legitimate transaction. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, even this guy that we just quoted, he starts off with towards the more optimistic side, saying, it could be trillions of dollars in the next couple of years. But then once he thinks about it, it seems like he tempers it, being like, well, it's also very volatile. And, he say the word bubble. And that kind of got me thinking of like, maybe this is a bubble. Maybe it has the chance to collapse. And especially with it being like so nebulous too, that it might even lend itself further to a collapse. Like, .com and things like that back in, what was it, the 90s, right? When that happened?
Late 90s, yeah.
Yeah. So maybe, I hope that doesn't happen because it seems like it's interesting technology. I hope that it doesn't completely collapse. And if it does collapse, maybe it can come back in some way. But yeah, it just seems like overall it's better to just be safe than sorry.
Sure. Yeah. I think, we both agree that there's probably a lot more scrutiny to be paid to this. Bitcoin's main benefits of decentralization and transaction anonymity have also made it a favored currency for a host of illegal activities, including money laundering, drug peddling, smuggling, and weapons procurement. This has attracted the attention of powerful regulatory and other government agencies, such as the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, the SEC, and even the FBI and Department of Homeland Security. In March of 2013, when this was an infant state here, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network issued rules that defined virtual currency exchanges and administrators as money service businesses, bringing them within the jurisdiction of government regulation. In May of that year, the Department of Homeland Security froze an account of Mt. Gox, the largest Bitcoin exchange at the time, that was held at Wells Fargo, alleging that it broke anti-money laundering laws. New York's Department of Financial Services issued subpoenas to 22 emerging payment companies, many of which handled Bitcoin, asking about their measures to prevent money laundering and ensure consumer protection. So these are very real cases out there that the government, fearing what you can do with this cryptocurrency, and they're fearing it under the guise of illegal activity, which is legitimate, but their fear goes a lot deeper than just illegal activity. Their fear goes to a lack of control, a lack of regulation. I mean, the federal government does not like things it can't regulate. Yeah,
and it seems like they're most likely going to use the crime angle to get their foot in the door, right, for increased regulation.
And they were doing the same exact thing with encryption on your personal phones. And even the encryption on your phones, they're taking it even a step further, and they're hammering home this whole idea of child pornography and child exploitation. And that's why, let's do it for the children.
Think of the children, yeah.
Right. And that's really what they're hammering home to try to crack your encryption. But we're looking at the same type of thing here. So I think unregulated currencies like Bitcoin that are speculative and have a potential for high value are much more likely to come under the scrutiny of the government than a transactional thing like Dogecoin, where people are using it for legitimate things, and it doesn't have enough power behind it to really warrant being used for illegal activity. Right. But again, in the end, I think it's really the technology that comes out of this that's going to be the winner overall. I think cryptocurrencies, I don't think they're going to go away anytime soon, but they're not changing the economy anytime soon. Governments just aren't going to allow it.
Yeah, it seems like it would be that simple, right? They could just say no.
Yeah. So what are your final thoughts on cryptocurrency?
Well, I definitely learned a lot about it today. That was kind of nice. And I hope that our viewers learned something too, if they were as clueless as I was. But yeah, I mean, it seems like it's not as future proof as, some of the jokes about it might make it seem like. But blockchain seems like it could be used for a lot of really good things, and hopefully good things. And I'm curious to see where governments take it in the next 5 to 10 years. If we do end up getting, that $1 trillion level that economist was talking about, how governments are going to respond to that, and how they're going to take it seriously, or, try to outlaw it or ban it, and, around the world, and how that's going to affect it. All that is interesting to me. So yeah, it's just a matter of, see where it goes.
Yeah, and I agree. I think a wait and see attitude is probably the best. I think we should not let Elon Musk, people of Elon Musk's nature lead the charge on this. Between selling flamethrowers and launching his Sportster into space for media gimmicks and stuff like that, I don't really think he's the authority that we want to use in this case here. I think it's probably best to, if you're interested in investing in it, I would suggest you do so very cautiously. I would not liquidate your 401k and dump it into Bitcoin, that's for sure. But, it's speculative. There's a chance that you could make some money off of it today. Why not get in on it like everyone else does if you do it smartly? So, but that's all we had today. Did you have anything else you wanted to discuss?
No, I think we did it.
All right. I think that is it. Before we go, I would ask folks once again to subscribe to the podcast. Audio versions can be found as Insights into Tomorrow, video versions as Insights into Things. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, and any place you get your podcast feeds from. I would also ask you to give us your feedback. Let us know how we're doing. You can email us at comments@insightsintothings.com. You can get us on Twitter at insights_things. We stream 6 days a week on Twitch when I don't have technical difficulties like this week. On Twitch, we are at twitch.tv/insightsintothings. If you have a Amazon Prime membership, you do get a free Twitch Prime monthly. We would love it if you sent that our way. Helps us to keep the lights on around here. And we have a lot of really bright, hot lights around here we have to keep on. We don't use it to mine Bitcoin. I promise you that. You can get us on Facebook at facebook.com/insightsintothings podcast. We're on Instagram at Insights Into Things. You can get us on our website at www.insightsintothings.com. And that's it. We're done. Another one in the books.
Insights into Teens, a podcast series exploring the issues and challenges of today's youth. Talking to real teens about real teen problems. Explore issues from braces to puberty, social anxiety to financial responsibility. Each week, we talk about the topics concerning today's youth. We look at how the issues affect teens, how to cope with these issues, and how parents, friends, and loved ones can help teens handle these challenges. Check out our video episodes on youtube.com/insightsintothings. Catch our audio versions on podcast.insightsintoteens.com or on the web at insightsintothings.com. Insightful podcasts by informative hosts. Insights into Things, a podcast network. Welcome to Insights into Tomorrow, where we take a deeper look into how the issues of today will impact the world of tomorrow. From politics and world news to media and technology, we discuss how today's headlines are becoming tomorrow's reality.
Welcome to Insights into Tomorrow. This is episode 13, Modern Monopolies. I'm your host, Joseph Whalen, and my co-host, Sam Whalen. How you doing today, Sam?
Doing okay. How you doing?
Doing all right. So today's topic is one that we've kind of been tossing around for a little while now, and it's in the news a lot lately with a lot of the tech companies and politics involved. It came to the forefront few months back during the Trump administration. They were kind of going up against some of the big tech companies, Facebook, Amazon, Google, and so forth. So I thought it was worthwhile to sort of take a look at this. So today we're going to discuss what monopolies are in the modern age. We'll understand what a monopoly is, how they operate, and why they're detrimental to a free and open market. Yet they're a unique product of capitalism. We'll take a brief look at the history of monopolies in America and how they've been handled before. And we'll look at the future of what today's monopolies and the complications inherent in regulating them are. Ready to get started?
Yep.
All right. So what is a monopoly? So in doing research for today's episode, I went to a couple of different sites, and this definition, I think, captured it best. It came from Investopedia.com. They say a monopoly refers to when a company and its product offerings dominate a sector or industry. Monopolies can be considered an extreme result of free market capitalism in that, absent any restrictions or restraints, a single company or group becomes large enough to own all or nearly all the market, goods, supplies, commodities, infrastructure, so forth, for a particular type of product or service. The term monopoly is often used to describe an entity that has total or near control of a market. Natural monopolies can exist where there are high barriers to entry, a company has a patent on their products, or is allowed by governments to provide essential services. So based on that definition, let me ask you real quick, do you think we have modern monopolies that fit this bill?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't think it takes that long to figure it out. There's like 3 drugstores. That's the first one that came to mind for me. Like if you think about it, Rite Aid, Walgreens, and CVS. That's just an example. Airlines too. Like if you just, I don't know, I feel like if you just think about it, there's pretty clear examples of at least a handful.
Sure, yeah. So in understanding a monopoly is characterized by the absence of competition, which can lead to high costs for consumers, inferior products and services, and corrupt behavior. A company that dominates a business sector or industry can use that dominance to its advantage and at the expense of others. So taking your example of the drugstores, if there are 3 drugstores that control all the pharmaceuticals to consumers, is that really a monopoly if there's 3 of them?
I think it's a monopoly if by there being 3 and they're being so established that it eliminates